Hello again, folks. Today we're into the 9th chapter of Matthew's Gospel. Another chapter bursting at the seams with content, and really because of time, we're only going to look at the first section or so, as far as about verse 13. This chapter carries on from where chapter 8 left off. So yesterday we saw how Matthew was now very clearly making the case that Jesus is God himself. This is no mere human. Yes, he came from a woman. Yes, his ancestry is on his father's side all the way back to Abraham through David, but he is both man and God, and he has authority over all sorts of things that mankind does not. So, for example, he has authority to heal illness, he has authority to control the wind and the waves, he even has the authority to drive out demons. And now chapter 9 begins with Jesus exercising authority to forgive sins. And this is where something happens that has not happened before in Matthew's Gospel. The religious leaders arrive on the scene and they challenge his authority. His authority is now being rivaled or challenged. In verse 3, they think to themselves, this man is blaspheming. Now, if you heard me forgiving someone of their sin, you would think the same thing, wouldn't you? You would think I was blaspheming. Why? Because you know that only God has the authority to forgive sin. And these teachers of the law, they know that full well. And they see this man, Jesus, healing and then forgiving sins. And they are led to one conclusion: this must be blasphemy. But little do they realize they're making a huge mistake, because Jesus is not just some guy. He is God incarnate. And he illustrates it to them there and then, immediately. Verse 4, he knows their thoughts, were told, and he challenges them about it. And now, hidden behind these stories comes one of the big questions that Matthew is getting at all along here. And that is this: how are we to respond to Jesus? When he calmed the storm in the previous chapters, we're told the disciples were amazed. When he drove the demons into the herd of pigs, the people in the town begged him to leave their region. When he forgave the paralyzed man of his sin, the teachers of the law, they heard it, they were convinced that he was a blasphemer. But also in verse 8, we're told in chapter 9 here, some of the crowds that were watching this exact same incident take place, they were moved to praise God. So time and time again, we see different responses to Jesus. And the question is now coming through the text: how do we respond to Jesus? Who are we in this story? Are we one of the ones that's doubtful? Are we someone who is convinced that this is a fraud? Are we, like the disciples, amazed and maybe afraid and fearful at the same time? Or are we, like the crowds, moved to praise and worship, since this man has God-given authority? And that's the big question that Matthew both poses and faces himself now. And that's when we reach kind of these verses 9 to 13. Matthew nails his colours to the mast. The story is told of his own commitment to follow Jesus. And so Matthew really is saying here, the only appropriate response to Jesus is to follow him, whatever it takes, whatever that may mean. Matthew leaves behind his job, his wealth, no doubt, as a tax collector, his home, no doubt, and really everything that he knows. Why? Well, because for him, obviously, Jesus is worth following. And that's a challenge to us all. Everyone makes a decision about Jesus one way or the other. Everyone who has ever lived, everyone who will ever live, makes some decision about Christ. Either we hear, we believe, and we follow, or we reject him and we don't. There are no other options. Verse 10 also brings in the Pharisees, a familiar name to us, the chief opposition to Jesus. They are outraged, not so much by his teaching, no, but more so by his company. They think that holy people, messengers of God, should know better. They should only be with people who are good, people of reputation, people who are perhaps well-dressed, well-spoken, well-educated, and well-to-do. Sadly, this is still an attitude that many churches around the world have today. But this is an attitude also that must always be challenged. And Jesus wastes no time at all. He says, I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. See, this kind of holier than thou attitude is a stench to the nose of God. The idea that someone would be prevented from coming toward Christ all because of the way they look or the way they dress or the company they keep is awful. The kingdom of God is a classless society. There is only one type of person within it, and that is sinners who are forgiven. People who recognize their sinfulness before the Lord and have accepted his mercy and his grace. Loads to think about. What a challenge this is for us. Hopefully you've enjoyed this chapter. That's us again for today. Join us tomorrow for more insight into chapter 10. Until then, God bless.